Welcome back to another conversation with the guys here at Forefront Sims. I'm here with Cody and Tyler. And again, if you guys want to even just give a little bit of an intro for yourself, where your perspective is coming from on these answers, then we'll get straight into the questions.
Yeah, what's going on, everybody? I'm Cody, one of the co-founders and owners of Forefront Simulators. Looking at it from all different angles, I have a builder background and a golfer. You know, Tyler's very tech forward, so it makes a good combo to be able to knock out these questions.
Nice.
Yeah, let's go for it.
All right. So, starting off with the first question, what does it take to build a premium indoor golf simulator lounge?
It takes a few different things.
Mhm.
One, going for that premium feel, you want to have a premium brand, and I think having you know a cool name, cool logo just elevates the space immediately to create that country club feel.
Mhm.
Uh, but then also the fit and finish of your bays. You don't want to, if you're going for that premium, luxury experience, you don't want to walk into, you know, three or four simulator bays that are just enclosures. You want custom, intentional, thought out, well planned simulator bays to start. But then you have to think outside of that as well. The overall feel of the space with millwork. Does it feel like a country club? Does it have a nice spot to hang out, chill in between rounds, or you're watching and viewing. So I think it's quite a few different factors. Tyler, what am I missing?
Yeah, it's a lot of what you said, right? If I'm walking into something and I'm thinking, okay, this is my second space, my third space, somewhere I want to be. I want to be around other people, but it's somewhere I want to feel elevated. It's everything down to, as Cody mentioned, like you're in the lounge area, you're sitting in this a big comfy leather chair. Maybe there's a little an ambient fireplace. It is an experience. It is a place to go. It is a place to feel with like you're with other members that you can interact with and have community with outside of just golfing, and everything related to the fit and finish and being tied to a brand and really the overall consistency
Mhm.
are some key aspects into some of those build considerations for, especially for a more premium indoor golf simulator lounge or business type experience.
Yeah. So going on to the next question, because I think that was a great way to answer that. The next question being, how much does it cost to open a commercial indoor golf simulator facility?
So, you know, the build out can obviously vary,
Hmm.
uh, and it obviously depends on how many bays you want to put in. For an average 3 bay facility with a decent build out, you're looking at 150 to 200,000. And that gets you in the ballpark of having really good technology and quality, at least that we expect, time and time again, from a really premium fit and finish. They can obviously jump up, if once you increase your amount of bays or your extra amenities that you want to add. But if I'm out there looking to start a business doing indoor golf, I would have comfortably 200 grand ready to spend on a build out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and certainly, not necessarily areas that we would cover, but there's a variety of other things. The overall leasing for the facility, maybe getting the actual building itself built out, the shell if it's not an existing property. So, a variety of other considerations that would go into, the upfront initial costs, ongoing maintenance cost, outside of just the simulator build out. And to everything Cody said, you know, based on the overall fit and finish structures in there. A lot of those are factors into your overall initial investment and ongoing investment considerations.
Yeah, and to your point, Tyler, like I said, that rough 200 grand is an existing space
Yep.
with about 3 simulator bays.
Yep.
So that's just a ballpark, you know.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I guess this might even be answered just right now with that, but I know people do ask the question: how many simulator bays should an indoor golf lounge start with?
It's kind of felt like the magic starting number is three.
Mm,
We do
Mhm.
a lot
Yep.
of three bay facilities, and that's for a few different reasons. One, space requirements, because
Yep.
in a smaller space, you want to try to make it comfortable, but not
mhm.
cram too many in there. So three's kind of been that magic number, but also, um, it depends on how many people you plan on hosting and memberships you want to sell and all that good stuff. But if I'm starting out, I'd look for no less than three. But anywhere in that 3 to 5 range is good, to where you're not just having empty bays sitting around. You can actually fill them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think 3 to 5 is a key starting number. Obviously, there's a lot that goes into thinking about your overall sort of cash flow and how your membership plays into that. But it's also key to think about what's the experience that you want to have when you're having, if you want to have sim league nights throughout the week. How many people do you want to be able to accommodate, throughout those time windows? If you're going to have, tournaments and things like that, how many folks do you want to be able to have? So, it's a mixture of the overall, financials. Do you have enough base and the overall cost per bay, and sort of forecasting that out to make the business work and be profitable, and pay off your initial investment. But also, how does that play into the experience that you're trying to create of a facility that people want to come to, be a part of that community, is some key factors.
Yeah, and I think it's so interesting that you guys keep on coming back to the community and the people, because obviously that's the important part of it. So while this is, maybe this next question is more on the logistical side, I think obviously it weighs in so much. I guess not just the bays, not just the equipment, but also the areas for people to be. So, what room dimensions are needed for multiple golf simulator bays?
Tyler, I'll let you run with this.
Yeah. So we'll run with sort of our sort of 3 bay starting point, right? So, depending on the sort of dimensions that you have to work with, let's just assume you can do 3 bays against the long wall. So if we're talking about 16 foot per bay, if you're including like a sub wall in between, you're looking at probably at least 48 feet of length. Again, if we're thinking about just sort of doing bays along a long wall, or if you've got enough width, you could do, 2 bays, 4 bays total, with 36 feet of width in that space, and then probably closer to 50 or 60 feet of depth that way. And then you've got sort of a center walkway in between multiple bays.
Mhm.
That's kind of a quick starting point to think about. We mentioned, in prior episodes, uh, thinking about just 18 feet of depth in each bay, so you've got enough safety space. But when you're thinking about more premium golf lounges, more premium simulator businesses, typically there's also other space allocated for things like a putting area,
Mhm.
right? So having putting turf, and maybe it's also including something more elevated or advanced like a putt view system as well too. So typically in those types of installations, you might need an additional, 12 by 20 or 12 by 30 foot space, so you can have that putting area. And then we start to talk about things like an additional kind of lounge area as well too. And that might be another, 20 by 20 or 15 by 15 type space. So those are a lot of the considerations. If you also get into kind of the food and beverage aspects of this, you'll need a space for the kitchen, and then also accounting for the countertops and serving area, and also accounting for restrooms and some of those other basic storage needs as well too, are a lot of the key factors.
Mhm.
So again, for us, it starts with understanding, what are all the amenities you're looking to provide, what's the experience you're looking to provide, and then we can help you start to think through those are, what are all those additional space considerations you would need. um, or in more cases than not, when we're working with somebody who is looking to lease an existing property, not necessarily build net new, then it's how much of those can we fit in comfortably, within that existing space. And again, working with somebody, a professional who has that kind of design build experience, can help you help you account for those. Cody, you've got a ton of experience in just the overall GC space as well too, the construction side of this. Any other thoughts on space considerations?
No, I think it's just more or less, a lot of people when they're starting these businesses, they determine the location that they want to be in. Then it's okay, let me find 90% of the time, it's let me find an existing space that's available. So, um,
Mm-hmm.
our job is usually people come to us and like you said, Tyler, what can I do in this space? So we want to try to maximize the experience and the amount of bays they can fit in. So typically it's not like, hey, I'm going to go build a new space. Here's, what I want. How big does it need to be? It's more or less, hey, here's what I have. What can I do with it? So
Yep,
we're
exactly.
really, we're really typically maximizing constraints that we're dealt.
Yep.
Yeah. No, I mean that's that makes sense in terms of the people who are starting the business. Obviously, you have locations and all these other factors to play into, which I think is why it's interesting that you guys have brought up even in the beginning questions, even the smaller aspects that have nothing to do with build, but even like brand and whatnot. And I think it's important though. So moving forward, what are the key construction requirements for an indoor golf simulator business?
So some of the key requirements are, there's going to be some framing involved for the division of the bays. You want to create, there's a couple different avenues you can go with the framing, but you really want to create, depending on your space, enough privacy to where they feel comfortable swinging in that bay, but also not, closed off if you're dealing with a smaller space. So you're going to have some framing involved. You're going to have one of the heaviest components is you're going to have some electrical involved. Um, if you're dealing with an existing space, you probably have some impediments in the ceiling that we're about to cover up that you want to relocate. Your lighting is super important, and then all of your electrical components and power requirements for your launch monitor, projector, TVs, computer, making sure that those are in the right space. So I think those are your two biggest components that you have to worry about. And then beyond that, it's just, um, you know, the pretty stuff, paint, flooring, all that good stuff that you want to add. But obviously that's super dependent on the individual build out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Cody, you brought it up in prior episodes as well too, but HVAC ends up being a key thing that a lot of people don't think about on the construction side, kind of from two reasons. One, as you've mentioned before, this idea that there's a lot of people in there. They're swinging more often than they would be out in a golf course. They may not, they don't have the breeze that they might be getting on the golf course. So being able to handle just sort of the overall heat load of more bodies in the space, people actively swinging, being active. But especially if we're doing this in some of the constraints we run into when doing this inside of an existing facility is the HVAC may be in the way of what would be the ideal simulator space.
Mhm.
So accounting for the ducting, the bulkheads, receivers,
Mm-hmm.
and making sure that those can be either moved or we can adjust and to work around some of those constraints. It's just key considerations that we've run into with commercial builds.
Yeah, I think that those are great details. So again, kind of moving forward past that. So how should an indoor golf lounge plan traffic flow, seating, and player spacing? Because it sounds like you guys have a lot of experience, obviously, in not only the building, but the usage and the kind of understanding that goes into these spaces.
Yeah, I'll take a
Yeah.
stab at that first.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I mean, we typically try to think of it from all the way from the entrance to the point that you're playing the simulator. So everything from walking in, you're typically going to have a golf bag with you. Is it easy to get inside the facility? Getting to the actual simulator space or any check-in or registration desk or things like that. Is it easy to work, move around the space and get there and get to your simulator area? Do you have a space to put your bag? And it's people understand, especially if it's their first time there, where they should go. So I think that's one key aspect of just from getting in the door to your simulator space. What does that flow look like? Is there enough comfortable space to work around? You're not bumping into other people or hitting the walls, those types of things. So that's one key aspect. The other, when we think about seeding, is again back to this idea you're going to have everywhere from the individual player that's working on more maybe game improvement, or they just want to play around, and or more typically a group of 2, 3, 4 people who want to play against each other, play a scramble on the simulator. So especially around the simulator base, making sure there's at least seating for those 3 or 4 people to either have something to lean against or something to actually sit in safely, and also have good viewing angles to what's happening with whoever's up hitting and golfing. And then I think more generally than that, again, if you're more focused on this premium lounge, or you want to have places for folks just to sit and maybe wait for their time to come up, or after they've played a game they want to sit down and talk about all the shots they made or that they likely missed. Making sure you've got something so you can account for, depending on the number of bays that you have and kind of your expected occupancy, having enough seats that people can sit down before and after a round, get prepped, or come down from the round and have a conversation. So those are a lot of the key considerations there. But Cody, feel free to add any others I'm not thinking about.
No, I think you pretty much hit everything. Flow of traffic is super important. You want enough room to where people can walk behind golfers and go to the bathroom or go back to the front desk, we're not going to feel like they're getting hit in the face with a driver.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I'd say one of the key space or key components is sitting in between. If I'm playing around with my buddies on a golf sim, I don't want to slump down on a couch and get comfortable. I'd rather have something like a high bar stool that I can just lean on or quickly get up and down, because indoor golf, there's a lot of moving. You're not just sitting in a cart waiting on your next shot. So creating that space where your golfers, you got 4 in a bay, can get up and down easily, which I know sounds like a first world problem, but it really is an important factor.
No, I think that it sounds funny because it's like, oh, you don't want to get all the way up and all the way down. But at the end of the day, I mean, you were even bringing this up, Cody, when we were talking about building, I think previously. But this is at the end of the day, this is a hobby. This is fun. This needs to be a space where it's not only able to do this singular tool of maybe what somebody might just use for purely almost like athletic training. This is also this is something that you're going to go to with your friends, and you're going to want to razz a friend for missing a shot and not have to worry about getting all the way up and being tired at the end of it. So that perspective, I think, is honestly where so much of the value of these answers are coming from too. So going forward past that, how should an indoor same question again. What technology decisions matter most when building a golf simulator business?
So do you want to run with that one again, Tyler, and I'll hop in?
Yeah, no, I'll jump in on this one. Variety of different factors. I think it's everything from, and I'll focus maybe more on the launch monitor side, since that's such a core piece of the technology that's going into the simulator. But I think especially with the simulator business, there's aspects of looking at the software side of the different launch monitors. How easy is it to use? What courses are available? What other additional features, like more recently, things like AI trainers and practice modes and those types of things are available. I talked about the ease of use of the software. You've got folks who are brand new, maybe they've never touched simulator software before, so something that's easy for them to pick up and it feels intuitive. On the technology itself, again, depending on the overall experience, if you want this to be a more leisurely lounge golf simulator space that's less focused on kind of overall game improvement, or maybe coaching or bringing in club fitters, that types of things. There are still accurate launch monitors out there that give you very good metrics and numbers that you can take to the course. But there's also launch monitors that give you extremely detailed metrics and maybe additional metrics that aren't readily available for most of the other brands. So again, I think if it's something where you're thinking about, I'm going to have club fit, mobile club fitters come in here, or I want to give that premium game improvement experience, or maybe have PGA coaches come in as well too from time to time. That's just the overall capabilities and accuracy of the launch monitor is a massive piece of that. Um, and I think that's again where working with somebody who's got experience with multiple brands can help you evaluate those decisions of what metrics are available, what's the software look and feel like, how easy is it to use, what are the other amenities that can be added on in terms of things like swing cameras or balance plates, or again, it mentions like the AI trainer type capabilities. Um, and it's also something where you don't necessarily have to put that in every single bay. I know we've definitely worked with colleges and other commercial facilities where maybe they want to have multiple technologies out there because there's different features and capabilities in each one, and they want to have the best of both worlds.
Or
Or you may
like,
just want to have
yeah,
one day that's dedicated to your more performance game improvement coaching type stuff, and then the rest of them are still high quality launch monitors, still very accurate, but it doesn't necessarily have all the bells and whistles or metrics that a specific day does. So there are other technology considerations, but I think the biggest one is when you're thinking about a simulator business, just primarily the launch monitor brand capability software, those types of things.
like it.
All right. Yeah, and it's funny. With so many of these answers, it's like I would have never thought about that, of even just being able to mix and match that. That's it's a great way to go about it. So moving on again, um, we've talked about this more in a logistical manner and maybe more in aspects of build and whatnot. But what are the most common design mistakes in indoor golf simulator lounges that you see?
I think a common mistake is not creating that high end luxury feel and just throwing in a couple enclosures. Also, trying to cram too much in a singular space too, to where it feels overdone. And not creating little moments to keep the person there. You want them to come and hang out and enjoy, you know, a good experience, and hang out and watch a couple other of their buddies. Maybe their buddies are coming in the hour after, and they just want to hang out and watch. Like,
Hmm.
if you don't have that opportunity, then I feel like you're missing out on a lot of revenue, from a business standpoint.
Yeah.
I think Cody brought up the idea of having these little moments. I know we're working with some commercial sims now where they are planning things like having a plaque wall for effectively sort of their club champion, and highlighting people who are doing well in the sim leagues, and having TV boards that can showcase like how are people progressing throughout the league. And so it gives you something to come back to and see how you're comparing. And even this idea of like having a parking spot just for the quote unquote club champion. So those are things that are generally outside of the simulator design consideration,
Mhm.
but it's part of that total package, and helping you create something that people want to come to. And Cody mentioned as well too. I know we've definitely had the experience where we have helped simulator operators put in a business that's relatively close to other simulator businesses that may have gone more of that like packaged enclosure or packaged route, versus something where we've built something more custom, more
Mhm.
intentional. And generally speaking, maybe I'll say subjectively, but it certainly feels like they are doing much better in their business, even though they've gone in somewhere where there's other competition, just because it's a night and day experience, difference from that perspective.
That's really interesting. I mean, it makes sense when you think about it, but that's really cool to hear. So, past that, and I know that there's different brands. Obviously, there's a lot of different brands, but you have TrackMan, Foresight, and some other really big players in this space. But we don't necessarily need to talk specifically necessarily about brands. but even just in terms of maybe even specific aspects or abilities or capabilities or strengths and weaknesses, what should businesses be comparing in terms of those aspects of these different simulator systems, specifically when they're designing something for commercial use?
I think the biggest thing is value. Um, it's gotten to where we have a lot of really good technology to choose from. It's not like it was 10 years ago where, you had a couple key players. Now there's plenty to choose from. So I think you have to sit down and you have to, and we help the client with this,
Hmm.
consult what fits their budget the best because everybody's got a budget. But ultimately you have to sit down and you have to understand, hey, what are the key components that I'm looking for golfers to have from a data perspective and a performance perspective, but also what fits my budget. Because now, not only are there so many brands to choose from, but each brand has 3 to 5 different levels of launch monitor that you can have. So, um, I think it really comes down to which brand and which model fits and brings the most value for your specific business. Obviously, we have quite a few that we work with on a regular basis. There's higher premium ones, that cost a lot more money, but that doesn't mean that they bring as much value as one that is a little bit more middle of the road, performs well, and has the features that you need. So, um, I mean, I think value is the number one between the different technology brands.
Yeah, I think as you're evaluating value, it's a lot of things Cody said. It's, what are just the fundamental capabilities, measurement capabilities of the launch monitor and the brand. I talked a lot previously about just the overall software aspects as well too, how much the brands are investing in their software, improving the visual fidelity of their courses, the number of courses they provide, and then what other amenities work um, with those brands and those softwares, everything from swing cameras, balance plates, motion plates for some
Hmm.
brands, integration with other third-party software, simulation software and companies. Um, it's almost more complex now to think about what's the right fit for my business and my experience, just for all the things Cody said, right? There's so many out there, and I think working with somebody similar to us that ends up, we've done so many installations with all the major brands out there, and we continue to experiment with the newer players that are coming into the market as well, to give you that kind of holistic picture of here's what is going to work best for what you're trying to achieve.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think for us, what is a huge benefit is we're tech agnostic, so we don't we're not tied to a singular brand that we're going to push more than another. We don't get kickbacks from a company that is paying us to push their brand. We're going to give you a very genuine, honest
Hmm.
uh, answer or feedback based on your unique specific case.
That's awesome. I think that that's honestly, you guys have the experience and the attention to detail, obviously, and the ability to, avoid pitfalls and things like that because of it. But having the ability to have somebody in a professional space that is, again, brand agnostic, that can see where your scenario is and what your best needs are and the value you need to achieve is I almost think one of the most valuable things that you guys offer from my perspective. Um, and I think there's one other aspect to this that you brought up before, Tyler, even, but I think it was even just a question before. But assessing the type of value that you need for your type of clientele, I think, is another thing that's really interesting. That obviously not every builder is necessarily bringing up, but you guys, with the attention to detail that you have, I think it's important.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So we've covered a lot so far. Let's get on to the next question, though, which is what should be included in the budget for a commercial indoor golf facility?
So you have your major components with technology, and that outside of your location, your lease, or expenses, all that good stuff. Your first budget item needs to be tech. how much am I going to spend on tech? Because again, with all these different brands, there's different price ranges. So figuring out your tech components and then your level of build out. If you're, wanting to go with standard ceiling and wall protection, or even back to the tech 4K versus 1080p, your different lighting elements. But I think when I'm budgeting, it's how many bays can we fit, what technology we're going to use, and then how many extra amenities are we going to fit it. So like Tyler, some people come to us, dead set on wanting to use putt view, and
Yep.
integrate some practice putting into their facility. So um, I think it's understanding what key components you want to include in your facility, and that's where I build my budget off of.
Right. Yeah, I think some of the external factors we've talked about in prior meetings as well too is just you've got factors around your leasing, if you're also involving a separate GC or architect accounting for those things as well too. But a lot of the core budget, as Cody was referring to, is it's really dedicated to the simulator, the overall technology, the overall fit and finish. That's going to set the largest majority of your budget, and then you've got some of the other just standard business pieces around it as well.
Mm. So moving past that, again, kind of more of a logistical question because we've gone over so much of, I think, even the value and strategy aspects of this already. How long does it typically take to design and build an indoor golf simulator lounge?
So for us, the design aspect of it can change, right, with the complexity of the build out. Um, but overall, it depends on how early we get in with the client, because a lot of times people call us and they say, "Hey, I'm just starting this business. I want to use you guys. Here's 3 different places that I'm looking at."
Mm,
So we almost can't even initially just jump right into a design because they may not even have the space
Yep.
selected. So but I would say on average, in order to develop a really good design and concept to be able to put into the build phase, you're probably looking at, 4 to 6 weeks. And some can be faster, some can be longer. We have one that we've been working on for almost a year, where we're just from the design aspect, them changing locations, us meeting out there. So, and then working through all the lease agreements and stuff. So it really can vary, but I think a safe bet, just because we've gotten pretty proficient in it, is 4 to 6 weeks once you've found your space, and that's getting actual concepts made to where we have renderings that you can use for marketing material as the build out's going on. And then again, the build is kind of the same thing, right? Depends on the complexity. If it's pretty straightforward, we're kind of getting through them in 6 to 8 weeks. But if it's more complex, then and the build requires a lot more attention, you could be 3 to 6 months. But a lot of ones that we've seen, when we're in control of the entire thing, a 2 month build out is not out of the realm of reality. It's pretty. We got a bunch of experts on our team, and we've kind of got it down to science and what needs to flow and what pattern. And so, but again, it depends on you and your project.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that's also how involved does the owner want to be in that design process, or if they have their own design team or an architect involved as well too. I know in a recent example, we're at the point where we've got all the core structure designs in place, but now we're working through things like what kind of let's look at some different swatches for the type of fabric that we want to use and look at different colors, because the branding is going to be that important, especially for some of the themed simulators that we want to do. So again, being able to work with somebody who's flexible and doing some of those iterations and getting to the fine tuning for those owners that want to be heavily involved and are very much care about the experience and the brand. Whereas some owners are a bit more hands off, and they want us to come up with all those key recommendations and design elements. So, we're happy to work either way, and I think that's something you should be looking for, is somebody who's flexible enough to be able to accommodate some of those considerations and some iterations, especially for such a typically a large investment.
Yeah, and one last key factor is permitting. If
Mm.
when you
Yeah.
how long your municipality is going to take to go through the plans and the permitting process, and then the inspector coming out, and obviously there's going to be stuff to fix. So getting on it and fixing it quick, I think that's one thing people, and we try to set the proper expectation on the front end. Is like, oh, when we permit your space, you know the construction can't start until we actually get the permit, and that's out of our hands. So, and each county city is different. Some are faster than others. Some take forever. Depends on their workload. So that's a major factor in timeline.
Yeah, and I honestly, I was kind of thinking some of these aspects and wondering if you guys were seeing them as issues, or big or small, or not. But I also love that you guys brought up even just the variance and the ability to work with either of those kinds of ends of the spectrum. Because I think for some people, almost building something for almost a year sounds like a nightmare, and for other people, that sounds like, okay, great. That means that you guys are so versatile and in the ability to work with different clientele, which is honestly really impressive. So, moving on to our last question for the day. What should owners plan before signing a lease for an indoor golf simulator business?
Tyler, I'll let you run with that one.
Sure. So I think, if they're getting to the point of signing a lease, that means they should already obviously probably know the footprint of the space that they're getting into, and typically how many bays we can likely fit in there, because a lot of that's going to go into their own business modeling and the factors that they need to consider for their membership programs, their forecasting, those types of things. So I think that's one piece of just knowing how many bays can you get in there, and does that meet some of what you need to do from a model, or adjusting your own business model to account for that. I think the other pieces are, even before signing a lease, if as long as we know the floor plan, having that kind of overall design and general aesthetic, at least at sort of a 20,000 foot level of, here's what I know the flow is going to look like. Here's what I know the bays are generally going to look like. Those all end up being, I think some pretty key factors of making sure you know what you're planning to get into before you sign that lease, and then continue to move forward with the actual simulator build out post the permitting pieces. And then Cody mentioned this in our prior question, but having some understanding and expectations for the timeline for all these things to happen, right? Everything from probably by this point we've already worked through a design, but getting through the permitting, the process around that, any inspection and reviews that need to happen. So I think when you work with a professional organization, we help to set those types of expectations, so you've got some understanding that, okay, once that lease is signed, you typically can't start building right away until you've gone through a lot of these other key construction considerations to move forward from there. Like, yeah, Cody, any other thoughts from your
Yeah,
experience?
one more key important factor is a lot of these owners want to look at 24/7 access, and with that, not every strip mall or location will allow it. So I think understanding with the owner of the property, hey, can I run 24/7? If I can't, what are my allowed hours of operation? Because some of them have noise ordinances that they can't have. So I think depending on your use, it's important to understand, can you or can you not have 24/7, and then how long can you stay open? Because one of the biggest benefits indoor golf is you can play when it's dark. Yeah, I can get up and go early and play before work. So, that's huge to understand in your lease agreement.
Yeah, I think it gets into some other considerations around also, just if you're doing things like food and beverage, what are some of those constraints, licensing considerations? There are a variety of aspects just around the overall business side. outside of the simulator experience that are just potential constraints to work around. Um,
Mm.
as key considerations going into it.
No, those are both, I think, such great little details that, yeah, obviously there's so many of these businesses that are starting that obviously uh, have at least thought about those two factors, so to make sure of them on the front end. I think so many of these answers, whether it's this time or some of even the previous sets of them, have come back to the attention to detail, making sure that you're working with somebody who has strong communication and who's actually even able to point out those things beforehand. It seems like is so useful in this space, which is such a great value from you guys. But that's all of my questions for today. I don't know if you guys have anything more that you want to maybe add to this at all, but for me, that's all I've got.
Yeah, no, I think I'm
Sounds
good. I
good.
appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you guys, and have a great rest of your day, and I'm sure we'll do this again soon.